Hi class, this is Mike Nolan and this is my week 6 multimedia discussion board. So political neutrality in the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act is a federal law that was passed in 1939. It was passed for the purpose of limiting certain potential political activities of federal employees. Not only federal employees, but employees in some states and local government employees who work in direct connection with federally funded programs. The purpose of the Hatch Act was to ensure that federal employees and also those state and local employees that were covered administered were administered in a nonpartisan fashion and to protect both the federal and state local employees from political coercion in the workplace. This ensures that federal employees and also the state and local employees are advanced based on merit and not based on their political affiliation as well. So with the Hatch Act, there is some prohibited activities. And the prohibited activities you include using official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering with an election, soliciting, accepting, or receiving political campaign contributions, running for election to a partisan political office, and engaging in partisan political activity on official duty time. And while the Hatch Act also often deals with issues on a federal level, the Hatch Act also deals with issues on a state, local, and municipal level. Most recently, with the Riverside County Sheriff elections, there was issues alleging potential Hatch Act violations, in which the question was specifically asked if the Hatch Act would prohibit officers and or deputies of a local sheriff's office from signing a letter of support in a sheriff's re-election. Questions were brought up whether the Hatch Act would prohibit the acting sheriff from requesting officers and employees to sign such letters of endorsements. And in looking at that and applying the Hatch Act as it relates to that issue, the Hatch Act would not prohibit Sheriff's Office employees or officers from signing a letter of support for a sheriff's re-election campaign. However, there would not be a violation provided that the employees were signing such letters of endorsements in their personal capacity and not in their official capacities as employees of the sheriff's department or as officers in their official capacity. Now, even though the Hatch Act was came into law over 80 years ago, I still believe that it still in today's society it's very important to have an act that prohibits federal employees and state and local and municipal employees from engaging in political activities when they're on their job and performing their duties. Um, Even though this act rates or relates back to the Depression era and was intended to prevent this machine politics and where patronage jobs were handing out on based on who you knew and not what you knew, it still is very relevant and important in today's society, where it's the Hatch Act now and was then is still about equal treatment and keeping partisan activity out of both out of the government. So hashtag violations are investigated by the U.S. Office of Special Counsel. If someone is found to be in violation of the Hatch Act, they could be subjected to a fine of up to $1,000, and that employee could also face other disciplinary actions, ranging from reprimand to removal from federal service. I think that one of the issues with the Hatch Act is there's been several recent instances, most recently with Kelly Conway, an aide to President Trump, where there's violations of the Hatch Act that are alleged, and whether there was or was not a violation with Ms. Conway is not the issue. It's the ability of the U.S. Office of Special Counsel to make an enforcement for a Hatch Act violation. In the case of Ms. Conway, they made a recommendation, which, whether you agree with it or not, they have no enforcement power. So they made the recommendation to the White House, and the White House opted not to go with their recommendation. So when they have something like the Hatch Act, where there's things that we can and cannot do, the governing body of the Hatch Act doesn't have the power to actually make the enforcement, just the recommendation. And I think that is somewhat of a problem with the Hatch Act. Well, that concludes this video. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch it, and I look forward to watching your videos.